Welcome, you and you and you. Welcome to the CDFM study group. My name is Helen Thomas. Today, we're going to be continuing review of CDFM Module 4. That is the optional module that you can take, an optional exam you can take as part of the CDFM. So once you've passed Module 1, 2, and 3, you're CDFM certified, then you can go on to take this Module 4 as the additional acquisition specialty in the CDFM. So that's what we're going over. All right, so let me do my little check, make sure my volume's up. Okay. All righty, because I hate to record and then you can't hear anything. So we're at, let's see where we are. We are CDFM Module 4, Competency 3, which is Resource Management and EVM. And this section accounts for the majority of the questions on the Module 4 exam. So as I mentioned, Module 4 is pretty straightforward to what's in the study guide. So you can kind of learn it, how it's structured in the study guide, and then you'll be able to recall it on the exam. So there's a lot of formulas in this section that you have to know. You'll see some topics that you've already went over, but you'll also have a lot of formulas that we have to go over. So bear that in mind. All right, so on page 431, it begins with the resource management section, affordability. So what we're trying to do now is we've identified a capability item that is going to fill that gap. So we need to determine, can we afford to buy that capability? So that's where the resource management comes in. So affordability is looking at all aspects of that capability to determine, do we have adequate resources, manpower, and everything that's necessary to not just buy the item, be able to sustain it. So we're going to look at those things. All right, so on page 431, you have a chart at the bottom. Those are the things we're going to go over, looking at understanding where in the acquisition life cycle does a lot of this thing happen. And if it makes sense that because an acquisition program does not begin until milestone B, you're going to have affordability assessment before you even start milestone B. It's a part of the package for the milestone decision authority to determine if you move forward in the acquisition process. So affordability is essential. All right, page 432. And again, I'm going based off of the notes I've taken for myself. And once I took the exam, some of the key highlighted areas. So I'm not going to be reading page for page. All right, 432, and it states affordability assessments for major defense program, because you only need to do these for major programs, and major automated, that's your MAIS and your MDAPs. Affordability assessments are required when? Milestone B and milestone C, because once you start the acquisition process in milestone B, that's the approval, your formal initiation of the program, then every step, the next milestone, which is milestone C, you're going to need to do another one because prices change. So the assessment typically should be conducted by whom? Who does the resource management affordability assessments? That is your RM. So your resource analyst, your budget analyst, your resource manager, all different titles in the DoD are responsible for doing the affordability assessment. So that's the answer right there, right? Who's responsible for doing affordability assessments? Budget analyst, resource manager. All right, so rest of that's straightforward. Next, on the bottom of page 436, it's probably a repeat from milestone A, I think we did it. But anyway, full funding is assessed by the milestone decision authority at each decision point. So remember the last few weeks we've been talking about before you move on to any phase or milestone or any particular stage in that acquisition process, there must be a decision point. So it's saying that it's assessed by the milestone decision authority or the senior acquisition individual at that level is assessing the cost. Is it still along what we expected versus the actual, or do we need to make some other decision? So full funding is assessed by the MDA at each decision point. That's the purpose of a decision point. Think about it in that sense. They're making a decision based off of the data that was collected in the phase before that. All right. Cost as an independent variable, page 437. This comes up quite often, so it must be important to you, right? And the idea is that it's cheaper, easier, better to cut your costs earlier on in the acquisition process. You don't want to go through this whole milestone and acquisition phases to get all the way to the end to realize, oh, this is not working right and it's costing me more money. So the cost in this context refers to the life cycle cost, which should be treated as equally important to performance and schedule. So again, with the acquisition, always remember you're evaluating cost, schedule, performance. Again, cost, schedule, performance. So whenever they're doing those decision points, they're looking at, okay, I estimated $10, now it's costing me $50. I got a problem. That's not what I plan to spend, or it's going to take the contractor a longer time to do the job. Performance, what's the quality of the work? What's the value of the work once they're done? Hopefully, you want the value to be more than before the job was done. So cost as an independent variable, looking at the entire life cycle cost that we went over, I think in 4.2, is making sure that you remember that whole acquisition process. So affordability assessments are done by the resource manager. They are assessed by the milestone decision authority at each decision point. And full funding, because when you get to the point where you're using procurement and military construction, those are full funding. RDT&E is an incremental funding, and O&M and MILPERS are expense type appropriation because they only like 1 year. All right, page 439 says acquisition system costs. And so everything here is going to be focused on what you do. So you see the diagram, you got two arrows. The first arrow says life cycle costs, which we went over. That's that cradle to grave from developmental costs to disposal of the item. Also includes overhead, right? All those administrative costs. So general and administrative costs, all of that is included in your life cycle costs. And then you have total ownership. Even if you don't remember what the book says, think of what ownership means. Ownership is not just what it costs to develop that item. It's total. When you own that car, well, it's not just to put gas in the car. You got to change the oil, tire goes flat, you need extra tires. So what does it cost you to own that car, to own that equipment? So it's an intra-government cost, because anybody that has an input in that particular capability, what does it cost? So life cycle costs plus any other additional cost that can be attributed to having that equipment. Life cycle costs versus total ownership costs. Life cycle is simply from the time you develop the item to the time you dispose of it. Total ownership is exactly as it states. If you own that item, there's other entities that share the cost. So that's your life cycle cost plus that additional ownership cost that's attributed. And let's say you forgot what the acquisition timeline looks like or life cycle. Page 4310, give it to you again. Oh, 4310, give it, okay, a little rhyme there. All right, so that's your life cycle cost composition. Again, you have your developmental costs where you're using your RDT&E, your flyaway cost, which is procurement of the prime equipment, weapon system cost is your flyaway cost plus procurement of the support items. Excuse me, procurement cost is everything, including the initial spares. Program acquisition cost is including your military construction, so that's your RDT&E, procurement, and MILCON. And then you have operation and support, which is O&M and MILPERS, and your O&M is used to dispose of the item, cradle to grave. On page 11, you see a diagram, 4311. That's a chart that depicts the annual program expenses when you start from research and development till you dispose of the equipment. Based on the diagram, I might say, okay, which is the cheapest cost? Well, disposal, based on this diagram, appears to be the cheapest cost. Or I might say, which is the most expensive cost of this program? Well, the highest bell curve is the operations and support. Or think of it this way. It's going to cost you one price to develop the product. And then let's say that equipment lasts for 10 years. Well, operations and support is sustaining. So you can clearly see that it's going to cost you more to sustain that item. So if you're asked the question, which is the most expensive life cycle cost? It is your operations and support. Based on page 4311, that diagram, you can clearly see which that is. Ready to go. We talked about the acquisition being evolutionary process, meaning they don't always have to start from researching the capability. You might already have that particular item, what they call it, COT, a commercial off-the-shelf item, that it doesn't require any major government alteration to be able to use it in the military. So it's an evolutionary acquisition process. All right, let's go to page, let me see. Some terms you should be familiar with. Page 4316, the first paragraph, where you, for ACAT 1 or above, remember ACAT 1 are major programs, and analysis of the alternative is required. So this is talking about the same information when we went over the phases and the milestone. Remember, in the first phase, material solution analysis, a part of that process is we know what we want to do because it was approved. It was written in the approved initial capabilities document, the ICD. It says this is what the capability needs to be able to do. These are the specs. And then we have various courses of action. And then we need to analyze those courses of action. So that's what the analysis of the alternative. So from this information, I can ask you, well, who's responsible at the DoD level for providing us guidance before we do the analysis of the alternative? Okay, we're talking about costs. Who at the DoD is responsible for giving us cost guidance? That is the DCAPE, Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation. So the DCAPE gives them guidance before they actually go into the analysis of the alternative. So that takes care of that. And it's mentioned on page 17. First paragraph says, the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation develops and approves the study guidance. So this is the same stuff you learned in Module 2, Competency 2, Cost and Economic Analysis, and we went over it for 4.1 and I think 4.2. So you see how the information overlaps. You can't really separate because it's in a different book. All right, what else? All right, page 4318, the first major step leading to a successful analysis of the alternative is the creation and coordination of a well-considered analysis. Yeah, you got to have a plan, right? You don't want to do an analysis and you don't know, okay, what are we analyzing? What are we looking for? What are the criteria? What are the objectives that this particular course of action needs to be able to meet? Okay, able to meet, check, check. So you have to have a plan before you begin. Not that I'm simplifying it too much, but basically that's all that they're talking about there. Anytime you see anything dealing with cost, estimate, cost, that is your DK. Now I want to point out to you, let's see if it has it on here, because I have a note. Because depending on what exam you take, sometimes you'll see that you might recognize the DK, but on older exam, the title used to be called CAIG. I think it's Cost Assessment Integration Group. I have to find what that means, but I have a note because I remember I've seen it somewhere. Hold on, let's look. But I know CAIG is the same thing as the DK. If I stumble on it, I'll make sure that I explain what it is. But just in case you don't see DK and you see CAIG, the cost, I think it's Cost Assessment Evaluation Group. No, that would be E. I don't know. Investment Group? I don't know. It's been so long and I haven't seen it in the book, but that just came back to me. All right, 4325. We talk about the program manager depending on the program. For programs that will be reviewed by the DoD level, your program manager has to complete a cost analysis requirements description. That's the card. So guess who's going to provide guidance on preparation of the card? DK. So this is the written document to actually do your cost benefit analysis for that program. So the card, so DK gives you guidance on analysis, programming, phase of P, the analysis of the alternative, they update the future year defense program, and gives you guidance on the card. That's at least 4 things that the DK does. I can only make this stuff so exciting, right? So you got to find your own joy in it. The joy is you becoming CDFM certified like me one day, right? So that means you got to bear it, grin and bear it. All right, page 27, 4327 should be familiar to you. Hold on, let me, I don't like that. All right, should be familiar to you because these are the cost estimating methods that we've went over numerous times in different module, different competency areas. So remember, analogy estimate is saying that I have this capability that I need to build, and I have one similar system that's similar in capability, similar in the attributes that it has to what I need to build or to get to fill that capability gap. So analogy is done early on. I got one similar system. Parametric is looking at it also done early on. If I do not have a single thing that's similar to what I want to do, but I have similar things with different capabilities. I need to have up armor. This particular item has it. I need GPS. This other item has it. And I can take the cost of each one of those capabilities, put it all together, and then I can come up with an estimate for what I'm trying to build. So that is parametric. So if you have, let's say, a house, okay, so I'm trying to build a three-bedroom home, and it's got the kitchen, it's got the dining room, all the stuff, and I don't see another house like it. So I can't use analogy. But let's say I see a house that has, I like my fenced in yard. I can find out how much it costs to put the fence around it. I see another house that has 3 bedrooms. So I can get the cost estimate of how much it costs to put those 3 bedrooms in. So you see what I'm saying? You look for different entities that have certain attributes for what you're trying to build. And then that is called parametric. So those are done early on. Engineering is assuming, bottom up, because I don't have nothing that is in my inventory that even resembles what I'm trying to do. So engineering is very detailed, and you have to, every single step of the process, you have to come up with the cost. Actual cost is exactly what it says. I have these aircrafts already in the inventory. I just need to build some more, so I have an actual close enough cost to use. So the gross estimate versus detail. Think about it. If I'm taking, it's a gross estimate if I don't know exactly, let's say parametric, right? I'm taking gross estimates from each one of these and I'm trying to come up with a cost. Analogy, I have one similar item, so I'm going to come up. Those are called gross estimates. Versus if you're doing detailed, specific, step by step in the engineering, that's a detailed estimate. So you think about it in that sense, where this stuff doesn't become difficult. And on the diagram on page 4327, you can see at the bottom of that diagram, milestone A, you do analogy or parametric. Milestone B, where you have the engineering and manufacturing, you can still be doing your estimates, because as you move along in the process, you're going to take that gross estimate and you're going to actually be coming up with a detailed estimate at the end. And then at milestone C, you're using the engineering and actual cost. So if they say, which cost estimate do you use early on in the process? I would say parametric or analogy. Which cost estimate do you use later on? You can use the actual cost or engineering. If I have to actually go detailed, it's going to take me a while to get the actual detail. As I'm building it, I'm getting the cost. As I'm building the other part, I get the price. And so it's going to take until production and deployment to get the actual cost. All right, so I just wanted to refocus you on the cost estimating method. This is the same exact cost estimating method you've seen before. And they're explained again on page 4328, parametric, analogy, and engineering. So remember, engineering is bottom up because you got to start from ground zero and you got to get the cost as you move up in the process. As you move up, you get the cost. Parametric is we have costs up here and we're taking the costs that we want. So it's top down, parametric. An analogy, you just have one similar item already in operation. You just use that cost. All right. Okay, page 4330, the second paragraph that begins with, in contrast, quantitative risk analysis can provide a broad But what I want to get to, because remember, all throughout this process, we're doing risk analysis. And so risk analysis assesses the aggregate variability in the overall estimate due to variability in each input probability distribution, typically through Monte Carlo simulations. Okay. All you need to know out of that is, how do they do these? How do they determine the risk associated with building this capability? They use Monte Carlo simulations. So the simulators will pretend like they're actually the warfighter using that equipment, and they'll be able to assess the risk associated with where they are in the process. So Monte Carlo simulations are used to do the risk analysis. So it allows the analyst to describe your level of risk, whether it's high cost, average cost, or low cost of risk. What kind of simulation? Monte Carlo simulation. All right, what else we got? Page 4331. The only thing I want to point out here is the senior acquisition person at the DoD. In the newer study guides, such as of this video, is the 2020 study guide for module 1, 2, and 3. In that, the senior acquisition person at the DoD level is the Undersecretary of Defense Acquisition and Sustainment, USDA&S. In the older study guide, that title of that individual was the USD AT&L. So you'll see it in the middle of the paragraph on page 4331. That means you have to know that, because if this is a 2011 study guide for the module 4, and they ask you who's a senior acquisition person at the DoD level, you're not going to see USD-ANS, you're going to see USD-AT&L. So you need to know that. USD-AT&L equals USD-ANS. All right. Thank you. We talked about the card. Who does the card cost assessment? That is the program manager. So in the acquisition, again, when in doubt, and they say who does the affordability assessment, that's the resource manager. Who does the acquisition program baseline? Program manager. Who does the card? Program manager. Right? You see where I'm going with this? All right. So for this particular section of module 4, beginning on page 4335, I would say is the most important section in module 4. Earned value management, because you'll see it has several formulas that you'll have to remember to be able to be successful. Now, I took the module 4 exam. Okay, COVID was 2020, so December 2020. Since I had a downtime, and all these years I've been kind of working to help everybody do module 1, 2, and 3. I never did my 4. So as COVID hit and things shut down, then I focused on module 4. And I will tell you that it is essential that you know these formulas. And also, I couldn't use no pen and paper, nothing. So it wasn't, I had to know the formulas so that I knew what to do or which answer to pick. All right, so let's look at what is earned value management. And I'm going to read what it says on 4335. EVM is a tool in the management and oversight of major defense programs. Makes sense, but that's not what I want, because it's a tool used between that the contractor, it's a tool that allows both the government and the contractor on the top of page 4336, that's your program manager, to have visibility on the cost, schedule, performance. How are things progressing in that program and the development of that item? So the visibility not only provides insight to contract performance, but also provides the necessary data points. So whenever they get to these different steps in the process, the EVM process will tell them where they are in that development state. So it ensures that cost, schedule, and technical aspects of the contract are really integrated. That's the purpose of EVM. I can't talk. Hold on there. Then it also tells you under EVM applicability, EVM compliance is required on cost or incentive contracts valued or greater than 20 million. So that sounds like something important you should know, right? So EVM or contracts, cost or incentive contracts that's more than $20 million. So it's equal to or greater than 20 million. EVM. The top of page 37. Earned value management is a management tool between whom? It's between the government, that's your program manager, and the contractor. So they can both keep track of the stages of that program. So there's three things. It's a management tool that relates the scope of work to its associated budget and schedule, because we already have an estimate before we start of how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to get the job done. So we're going to relate it in the EVM process. It measures work progress. That's the second tool or thing that it does. So it measures progress. And the third thing, it states the value of the work. So as it's measuring progress, it's looking also at the value of the work done. Because you can have a contractor that gets the work done, but once you have that work inspected, it's like, yeah, I don't think that's quality work. So it's not going to be valued as much as you thought, or even value less than what you began with, and you got to do the work over and fire that contractor. So EVM is a management tool that compares the scope of the work to budget and schedule, looks at progress, and looks at the value of the work. That's page 4337. Extremely important, because I think I saw that somewhere else. All right, so let's look at the diagram on page 4339, EVM in program management. All right, so again, you're looking to see whether things are based on what we budgeted for. How is the progress relating to cost, schedule, and performance? So let's say you see that diagram and you don't know nothing else about the program. You're going to have to be able on this exam, because we're going to go over the formulas in a little bit, which is crazy that they presented it here, the data elements, before you actually explain what ACWP and BCWP and so forth means. But we're going to go over that. I'm going to try to slow it down a little bit, because this is your bread and butter. So on the diagram, and we'll come back to it, is you're going to have to say, is this, if you see this diagram, is this project over budget, under budget, on target? Is it behind schedule, ahead of schedule, just from the diagram? You're not going to do no calculation. And the only how you're going to be able to answer that question is if you know the difference between BCWP and BCWS. So we're going to come back. Let me put my pencil here to that page. We're going to come back to that page after we understand the formula. So let's start on page 4340, where you have budgeted cost of work scheduled. That means based on how long they say it's going to take to get the job done and build that item, I have a budget associated with it, BCWS. The budgeted cost of work performed, that's the value. Okay, let's see. The BCWS is the value of all work scheduled. So that's like an estimate based on schedule. BCWP is the value of all work actually accomplished. So after they do it, I have another value. The actual value is BCWP. That's your earned value. So BCWP and earned value, EV, is the same thing. Again, I'm on page 40. So let me do it again. Let me start over. Budgeted cost of work schedule is your estimate based on how long the contractor says it's going to take them to build that capability. Budgeted cost of work schedule. Then you're going to compare that to budgeted cost of work performed. Perform says the job's already done, but I'm looking at the value of the work after it's been done based on that schedule. So the value of the work done, BCWP, is also called earned value. Right, here gets story gone. Actual cost of work performed, ACWP, is the cost incurred and recorded for performance measurement. Remember, we said cost, schedule, performance. So performance, after the job is completely done, I'm not just looking at the value of the work for BCWP. I'm looking at the actual cost, right? Stay with me. Cost incurred. Budgeted at completion, the budget for the total contract through any given authorized work, while the estimate at completion is an estimate for the same level of authorized work. So that's, you're going to need to know BCWP. All right, so hold up. So the formulas are not until way back here. But keep your hand on page 4339. We got to get through this process first. So let's look at the bottom of page 40. By comparing these 5 items, because the question is going to be that, so what? Okay, so my BCWS is greater than my BCWP. What does all this stuff means? And we're going to get to that. The program manager can determine the cost and schedule status of the program. In EVM budget term, contract overrun, that's cost overrun or underruns, are determined by comparing the final cost of the contract with the contract budget base. Okay, sounds good. Stay with me. All right, 4341, they have several techniques, so just kind of review the differences. The one I want to highlight on page 41 is percent start divided by percent finish. So there's different EVM techniques that is used. The purpose of the percent start, the second bullet in the middle there, it says earned value. What's another name for earned value? The budgeted cost of work performed is respectively realized in the reporting periods the work actually starts and finishes. This technique tends to do what? Overstate performance in the beginning or the first half and understate performance in the end. So that one is important. Percent start, you review all the other ones, but I had that one as a important things to review. Page 343, the least desirable technique. So when you're studying, you want to look for these type of words, the most important, the preferred method. And for this one, the level of effort, LOE technique. If you read through, LOE is the least desirable method. That's all you need to know. Performance measurement baseline. So remember in the earlier sessions, once we identify the initial capabilities document, what we need to be developed, then at some point the program manager has to come up with a baseline. What's our starting numbers so that the milestone decision authorities can make a decision in the acquisition program. So performance measurement baseline is what we're talking about on page 4343. So earned value management is the establishment of that baseline. It helps you to get that starting point. That's how they do it. Or the budgeted cost of work schedule. Ooh, I just caught that. All right. So the baseline is using EVM to help you figure out how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost. So you'll get your baseline from that EVM process. But understanding this, the performance baseline, your starting point does not include management reserve. Because management reserve is something that the contractor or the vendor keeps. Just like when we get funding, we keep some in the commander's reserve. Understand when they say management reserve in acquisition, the vendor owns the management reserve. And that's mentioned in 43. It says it does not include management reserve. It establishes the contract level, time phase, and so forth. Rebaselining 4345 baseline maintenance just means as you move along the process, they're often updating the baseline. So you have to re-baseline that process and it has to get approved. Because on the bottom of page 46, talks about the method of rebaselining. Rebaseline may be referred to either replanning or reprogramming. So replanning is you're readjusting within the current schedule and current budget. You're readjusting things. You're readjusting the cost. Reprogramming is readjusting due to being over schedule or over budget. So it's going to take a little bit more work. You will need additional funding and approval to do so. Let's see. I'm going to come back to something. Yeah, I don't like how the study guide is set up, but we'll drive on. EVM formulas, woo, finally, page 4347, cost variance. So cost, schedule, performance. So cost variance is looking at the difference between what we estimated and what we actually spent. Schedule variance looks at how long you said it's going to take you to do the job versus you actually doing the job. So the cost variance equals budgeted cost of work performed, so that's the value of the work when you're done, minus the actual cost of the work when you're done. Cost variance. Schedule variance, budgeted cost of work performed, that's the value of the work when you're done, minus the estimate based on the schedule once you're done. And variance at completion is your budget at completion minus your, hold on. Sometimes I don't remember these things. Your estimate at completion. I want to hold that diagram. All right, so what are we talking about? Page 4347. So the bottom line is, if you know the formula, cost variance is BCWP minus ACWP, because actual cost variance, budgeted cost of work performed minus actual cost of work performed. So you know, based on that formula, even if you don't have a calculator and they give you some crazy numbers, if they say the actual cost of work performed is greater than the budgeted cost of work performed, well, based on this formula, it's going to make my answer a negative number. So that will tell me I am over budget because I don't want it to be negative. So let's read what it says. A negative variance is unfavorable. That means I'm over budget and indicates the contradiction is over his budgeted cost for the work actually completed on the contract to date. A positive variance, so I want my BCWP number to be bigger than my ACWP. So I want a positive variance because that is favorable, because that will mean I am under budget for cost. A number above 0 is good. A number below 0 is bad. So when you're doing the cost variance, anything greater than 1 is good, or greater than 0. That's a positive, means I'm under budget. So that's what you're going to need to know for this exam, is whether I'm under budget, over budget, based on the answer. Likewise, schedule variance. So the formula says schedule variance equal budgeted cost of work performed, that's the value of the work, minus the estimate, budgeted cost of work schedule. So based on just this formula, I know I want my BCWP number to be greater than my BCWS. So I want it to be a BCWP schedule variance to be positive. So if it's positive, it means I'm ahead of schedule. So let me read what it says. Schedule variance, a negative variance is unfavorable, and it tells me that I'm behind schedule. A positive schedule variance is favorable, is good. It means that I'm ahead of schedule. So a number below 0 is also bad, but you're going to need to know what does it mean if a cost variance is negative versus a schedule variance is negative. A negative cost variance is the budget over budget. A negative schedule variance is behind schedule. So you might have to stay in that area for a little bit. Now, with this knowledge on page 47, let's roll back to page 4339, that diagram. So you could see from the bottom of that diagram, you have BCWS, that's the budgeted cost of work schedule. Above it, you have actual cost of work performed. They show you the schedule variance. On the right of that, they show you the cost variance. And below that, they show you the budgeted cost of work performed. So remember the formula, BCWP minus ACWP is my cost variance. So I might just give you this diagram and I say, based on this diagram, you see the cost variance, you see the schedule variance. What does it mean? Okay, let's look a little deeper. I'm looking for the line that shows my BCWP. Okay, cost variance, my BCWP is below. That means the number is low versus my ACWP is up here. So if my actual cost of work performed is greater than the value of the work, then I am over budget. So based on what we know, this particular thing is over budget. Just from looking at the diagram, over budget. Schedule variance. I need my BCWP to be bigger than my BCWS, but the diagram says the schedule variance. My BCWP line, you can follow it, is here, and my BCWS, if you follow it, is also up here. That means my answer is going to be a negative answer, and a negative schedule variance means I'm behind schedule. So based on that, I'm behind schedule and I'm over budget. I think later on I'll do a video just on this. On this diagram, you also see the management reserve. That's the vendor or contractor. They keep their own management reserve outside of the actual cost schedule performance. But based on a diagram like this and you knowing the formulas, you're going to be asked, is that program on the budget, or on target, or over budget? Is it behind schedule, ahead of schedule, or on target? And we are almost to the end. So you got some other formulas in here. So make sure you review. I'm not going to go over these. Not that they're not important, but these you should be able to pick up. I want to focus on the one on page 49 because it's a long one, but I've seen it elsewhere. So chances are you may see it also. That is the formula for the estimate at completion, the EAC. So what makes up the EAC? So I think what it was, I don't remember how I saw it on the exam, but I remember they said the EAC, they gave me the ACWP, they gave me all of these values, and then it says performance factor. Well, guess what? You have to calculate the performance factor. If you go back on the page, I think it's listed starting on page 48, the cost performance index, schedule performance index. That's your CPI and your SPI. So I think they gave me the CPI and the SPI, but in the formula, if you don't know, performance factor is taking the CPI times SPI. So it's EAC equals actual cost of work performed plus budget at completion minus budgeted cost of work performed divided by the performance factor. Well, performance factor is multiplying CPI times SPI. Those two things that were on page 48 is you have to multiply those two numbers together to give you the performance factor. So I wanted to point that out to you. And then you can finish the formula. And then you got some more. So here's another diagram on page 51. You got cost and time. So let's see, they're talking about the budgeted cost of work schedule, actual cost of work performed. I don't see the budget. Oh, there it is. Budgeted cost. So it's the same thing because see the BCWP is at the bottom just above time on page 4351. Anytime your BCWP, which is the value of the work, is less than the actual cost and less than the budgeted cost, that means you're going to have a negative number. For cost, you're over budget. For schedule, you're behind schedule. So you have some examples on page 52, and let's see, it goes all the way to 53 and 53. I would recommend that you do those examples because it gets you thinking about it. So let's go to page 52. So I'll go over a few of these, if not all. All right, so this particular example, it says that, let's say you don't know it's behind schedule and over budget because they gave you the answer already. But let's say all you know is the BCWS is 100 million. The BCWP is 80 million and the ACWP is 100 million. So think of your two formulas, for your cost variance and your schedule variance. So they did behind schedule. What makes it behind schedule? So if you did schedule variance says BCWP minus BCWS. So if my BCWP is 80 million and I minus 100 million, that means my answer is going to be a negative 20. So anytime you have a negative number for schedule, it means you're behind schedule. Okay, then how is it over budget? Because cost variance is BCWP, which is 80, minus ACWP, which is 100. So again, it's a negative 20 million. So you're over budget. So you put your hand over there. Let's see what we have. The BCWP is 100. My BCWS is 100. So 100 minus 100 is 0. That means I'm on target, right? So I'm not over, I'm not under, I'm on target for schedule. And also I'm on schedule and I'm on budget. How am I ahead of schedule but under budget? All right, let's do the third one on page 52. If you take your schedule variance is BCWS is BCWP 100 minus BCWS is 80, it's a positive 20. So I'm ahead of schedule. If you're 0, you're on target. So if it's a positive number, I'm ahead of schedule. So that's how you have to remember, because you're not going to be doing a whole lot of calculation on the exam, but you need to know how these things operate for schedule and cost. All right, cost variance is budgeted cost of work performed, which is 100, minus actual cost, which is 80. It's a positive 80, so I'm under budget. Yeah, ahead of schedule and over budget. So ahead of schedule, that's 100 for BCWP is 100 minus 80, it's a positive 20. So I'm ahead of schedule. I can clearly see that. Cost variance is BCWP, which is the 100. ACWP, it actual cost me 120, which means it's a negative 20 for cost. If it's a negative number for the cost variance, then I'm behind, let me see, over budget. I'm talking budget. I got to remember whether I'm talking schedule or I'm talking budget. Got to fix it. OCD. All right, what else we got to do? Ooh, so look at the indices. I want to do, let's see, 4353, behind schedule, under budget. So you could pretty much get those. All right, SPI equals BCWP divided by budgeted cost of work schedule, which is 0.8. So I'm behind schedule. That's for the example. Cost performance index, the budgeted cost of work schedule. So the CPI is 100 divided by 80. It's a positive 1.25. The CPI for this program is 1.25, which indicates the contractor is performing more efficiently than planned. So you need to know, what does your indices tell you? Contractor is providing 1.25 of value for each dollar of cost incurred. And the SPI of the 0.8 indicates the program appears to be behind schedule. A review of the critical path will be necessary to validate. So a 0.8 is less than 1. So indices less than 1 is telling you that they're behind schedule. So that's why I say take a little bit more time in this section, and it also again accounts for the majority of the questions. All right, it looks like I am right on target. Let's see. Using the performance baseline. So I have an example here. My example said, what are these other practical exercises? On page 4359, they gave you situation A, BCWS, BCWP. I think this one are the same ones, ACWP. Ooh, what do I do with that? All right, cost variance is BCWP 100 minus 120. So that gives me a negative number, negative 20. So when it comes to cost, over budget. And schedule variance is 100 minus 80 equals 20. That's a positive for schedule. So I'm ahead of schedule. If it was equal, then I would be on target or on schedule. All righty. Okay, so that was a lot of information. And I think I'm going to have to figure out how to redo this diagram again with on page 4339. Based on your knowledge of the formulas, you should be able to say whether it's on target or ahead of schedule, behind schedule, over budget, under budget, or on target. All right. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube page, please consider doing so to help to promote our CDFM study group YouTube channel. This concludes CDFM Module 4, Competency 3, Resource Management and Earned Value Management. This is the most important section in Module 4. So take some time, go over this formula stuff again, more and more, so you get practice of understanding the meaning of, if they say your cost variance is positive, if your cost index, CPI, cost performance in this index is positive or greater than 1, less than 1, what does it mean? Then you need to be able to answer that. All right, this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. I'll see you guys again next time.